Okay, so welcome to the 8th webinar of the Enabling the Adaptive and Agile Organization with AEquacy webinar series. This time I would like to start with a personal story. In 1998, I joined Yahoo Italy as the first employee. It was a startup. We had no pre-existing policies or processes. And with the few people who joined me, the way we worked together should be invented day in and day out. Everything was very fluid. We would help each other beyond our roles. We would handle each problem together very quickly. Now, fast forward 2 years later, in the year 2000, Yahoo Global and Yahoo Europe would cascade processes and policies and rules and a well-thought distribution of roles into us. Each of the Yahoo Italy employee would have a local managing director, a European head of function, and at least one project coordinator that we reported to. And often they had conflicting agendas, and we ended up very confused and stressed out. So there were 3 or 4 levels of authorizations needed to make even the simplest of decisions. And in a matter of 2 years, Yahoo shifted from a very dynamic startup to a bureaucratic organization like every other company. So I believe that the decline of Yahoo started at that point, and although it manifested a few years down the road. So this introduction is because today we will explore the concept of organizational bureaucracy and what is called complicatedness, and also ways to simplify and speed up organizational agility with the AEquacy practices and philosophy, I would say. So as a start, I would like, as we very often do, to invite you in a breakout room where you will meet some of your colleagues present in this webinar. And I would like to invite you very briefly introduce yourself, your name, what you do, or the country where you come from, and answer and share the answers to these 2 questions. How do you know if your company, or if you are a consultant or coach, the company that you are working with has become bureaucratic and complicated? And the second question is, where would you start to turn things around? So what would you do? So you have other groups of 3, Christina?
We have 2 groups of 3 ready.
Okay, so you have 8 minutes to share, and please, take your time and make sure that everybody can make a contribution. And after 6 minutes, after the conversation you have in the breakout room, you will be invited back in the main room. Before we send you to the breakout room, is there any question or any comment before we go? Hi, Dora, welcome. Okay, I take it as a no. So,
you will be directly connected to the breakout room and automatically redirected to the main room when the time is over. So, ready? I'm opening the rooms now.
Welcome back, everyone.
Hey.
Hi. Any good insights from the sharing? Any comment? How do you know if the company has become complicated, bureaucratic?
I think Dora, if I can
Yep.
point at what Dora said. It's when bureaucracy is when it happens when an organization doesn't trust their employees, doesn't trust their staff, and that can easily happen when the organization grows so large that trust is hard to maintain. And another way of looking at it is bureaucracy is a series of processes and policies that interacting with a team or part of the organization is so expensive. It costs so much to engage with them that the benefit you get from it is diminished. So and that, frankly, that from my experience, that invites people learning how to work around that bureaucracy and how to bypass it, and that invites more bureaucracy. So
Exactly.
so it's a death spiral for larger organizations.
It's true. Any other comment? Oh, Dora, please.
Yeah, just like, yeah, that was the first question, how we discussed it. And it was interesting because Brian comes from Google, 40 years with Google. So yeah, so it was good to have the business side also in the room. And how would we turn things around? For me, the first reaction was like, oh,
it's impossible.
Yes. But like for me, it's two-sided. One is really BPR, looking at the processes and stuff. So really cleaning out all the stuff that is more work than benefit.
Useless, yeah.
Yeah, and just we are doing it because we've been doing it for whatever, how long. And the other side is definitely mindset, but focused on trust, but also on ownership and accountability part. So for me, that's the two sides.
Okay, it's a good starting point to turn this around.
And years and years and years.
It takes time. Not necessarily, but let's see. Renata and Christina, anything to share?
Yes, Christina asked me to report about our meeting, little meeting. We are a couple more than a group. And I have to admit that I'm lucky enough not to have experienced lots of bureaucracy recently. So I was happy to listen to her. And I can report that lack of trust is exactly the main topic she wanted to report, meaning that in the meeting reports, in the monthly meeting reports, the idea was always to check what everybody had done up to now. And she says, why don't we do things differently? Meaning, instead of working to be checked on top, from the top down, why don't we work in another way? And we sort of try to reach our objectives and then confront each other and see what happens. Am I right, Christina? The idea was that I was the one who had to report to see if I understood the problem in her company. Is that so?
Yes, you got it right. Yeah.
Okay.
Yes, this this timesheet at the end of the month, just
the
report.
timesheets.
Yes, the timesheet. We are still doing that.
Oh,
and this is because a lack of trust to see what have you done the whole month. It shouldn't be this way, absolutely. Because I can write whatever I want at the end. So at the end of the day, is what matters is if I reached the goals or not. And this will be done by working together with other people, with my responsible, if I have a responsible, okay, but definitely not a timesheet report at the end. So this is what I would change in my company.
Absolutely, absolutely. So many people believe that bureaucracy is unavoidable, although they are mindful of its evils. Once a consultant defended bureaucracy as the necessary outcome of complex businesses operating in complex international and regulatory environment. But indeed, since 1983, the number of managers, supervisors, and administrators in US only, the workforce, has grown by more than 100%, while the number of people in all other occupations has increased by just 44%. So in another data, in a survey by Harvard Business Review, nearly 2/3 of respondents said that their organization had become more bureaucratic in recent years. In the late 1980s, Peter Drucker predicted that today's organization would have half as many layers and 1/3 as many managers as their at the time counterparts, but he was hopefully off the mark. So bureaucracy have been thriving. I would like also to introduce the concept of complicatedness. Complicatedness is the increase in organizational structures, processes, procedures, decision rights, scorecards, committees that companies impose to manage the escalating complexity of their external environment. Boston Consulting Group recently surveyed executives and employees at more than 1,000 companies about their perception of the nature and degree of complicatedness of their organizations. And the results highlight the strong connection between complicatedness and performance, and indicate where companies should concentrate their effort to simplify. By the way, most companies react to their complex business environments by piling up, as you said, piling on new levels of complicatedness in the hope of meeting external complexity head on. But the resulting changes kill the reaction time and productivity because there are cumbersome structures, new rules, and efficient processes. So, for example, companies might address a product quality problem by adding a dedicated organizational unit, but this unit then introduces more rules, governance mechanisms, and meetings. So in the highly complicated companies in the BCG samples, managers spend more than 40% of their time writing reports, and Christina, in timesheets, of course, and between 30 to 60% of their time in coordination meetings. So a great part of the manager's time is completely wasted or I mean, dedicated to activities that do not add value to the customer. The BCG study also demonstrated that less complicated companies achieve revenue growth and profit margins that are both above average. So this suggests that complicatedness hampers growth by slowing innovation and the deployment of new products and services. And also it cut margins by injecting inefficiency and cost into operations. And the last interesting data from the BCG study was how respondents at different levels of a company view complicatedness. So here, the results are, in my opinion, particularly striking, because overall, the perception of complicatedness directly parallels the respondents' levels of managerial responsibility. So complicatedness scores from employees with no managerial responsibilities 70% higher than those from members of the board of directors. So this means that these findings go straight to the heart of what may be a primary cause of complicatedness, on top of trust, of course. So every organization's top leaders.
Giovanna,
yes.
Scusi, the use of managers' time is also a shift in on the timeline, like since 83, or it's of today?
From today.
Okay. So the blue, the yellow is writing reports, or how? I'm confused.
Sorry, the 40% is the yellow, is the time dedicated to writing reports.
Okay.
The other figure is, I should have depicted from 30 to 60%, but I couldn't choose both.
So it's
so I choose.
Okay, it grew from 30 to 60.
Yes. So for some managers, 100% of their time is only about these two tasks.
Okay. Okay. Well,
for others, it's only 70%. Okay. Thank you.
That's it.
No, thank you for asking. So I was saying, it means that the 70% means that the top leaders, first of all, have a substantial impact on the degree of complicatedness. Yet they fail to perceive just how much their company's complicated activities, processes, and interactions reduce employee productivity. And they're not regularly in the trenches, so they rarely feel the painful effect of complicatedness. Moreover, they typically don't need to live by the many rules and procedures that they create themselves, and instead can work outside of the systems that apply to all their workers. BCG findings suggest that many managers take little responsibility for how complicated life is for their employees, and many of them even believe that they are quite successful reducing it. Well, at AEquacy, we found a possible simplification solution that is based on a series of shifts in different areas of the organization: the structure, the culture, and the working practices. And I would like to mention 8 here with you. The first element is the structure. So moving to a self-organizing structure. In small and medium organizations, it's possible to run complex businesses with less than half of the managerial load typical or large organizations. Studies by Gary Hamel highlight that there are 1 manager and administrator for every 4.7 employees. That means that managers make up 17% of the workforce, but 30% of the total compensations, of course. Moreover, the presence of managers produce a lot of low-value management processes: budgeting, performance review, reports, timesheets, etc., that account for 16% of the employee's time. And it's reasonable to assume that 50% of all compliance activity is of questionable value. So AEquacy removes all managerial levels and it is organized as a network of self-organizing teams that takes on some of the managerial functions previously held by the supervisors. The coordination among the teams is supported by coordination teams whose members are peers from the different teams that are coordinated. And each team makes their own decision on how they want to work together. So in the AEquacy system, teams are the most important elements of the organization. They are like mini companies with their own profit and loss, their own governance, and they make decisions about their policies, their goals, and their metrics. And this, of course, reduces the, the complicatedness. So the majority of, almost all the self-organizing structures are based on a network of self-organizing teams. The second element is a cultural one, and you mentioned it very with much punctuality, so trust. Because one of the reasons of the development of complicated systems and processes is the fundamental distrust that leaders feel toward people down the lines. So the employees must be considered unreliable, lazy, and irresponsible. And so their works need to be regulated by strict rules and regulation. But when trust is developed in an organization, there is no need to suffocate people with rules and procedures. Imagine that for example, in IBM, the onboarding manual for new employees is more than 50 pages of do's and don'ts. In Nordstrom, which is a fashion chain in the United States, the onboarding manual is only 4 words. Use your judgment, comma, always. So I tell everything with these 4 words. The third element is still an element of philosophy or culture, and it's equifinality. So systems and processes in bureaucratic organizations ensure predictability of outcome because any activity is regulated so that work is done exactly in the same way. And for some purposes, this can work perfectly well, but when we consider problem solving as a response to new and adaptive challenges, the tested and reliable processes of the past will not necessarily produce the adaptive solution required. So AEquacy is based on this new principle, equifinality. I hope I pronounce it correctly, Brian. So equifinality is the principle that in open systems, a given end state can be reached by many potential means. it also means that a goal can be reached in many ways. So people in AEquacy have the freedom to choose how to reach the end result. And this is one of the probably the most easiest way to implement, even in large organization, a new way of working, by providing people the possibility to choose how to reach their goals and be measured only, as Christina said, when they reach the goals, not how they do it. Another piece really useful for reducing complexity, not complexity, but complicatedness, which is different from complexity, is to move the responsibility for the processes to the teams. Because when higher ups are the ones creating or advocating a process, the focus is on control and predictability. So the result is more bureaucracy. Moving the responsibility for creating the processes to the operational team level shifts the focus to what is best for the customer or the most desirable outcome. So operational teams are the closest to the final customer, and they have a good sense of what can or cannot be a positive result or a positive experience for the customer. And they are also the first to experience the problem that may arise from the implementation of a bad process. So the responsibility for the process is moved to the teams. Another piece that we kind of invented is, we called it a radical simplicity. And this is a simplicity checklist for when designing or re-engineering a process. So in AEquacy, we suggest that before the team adopts a new process or change, is about to adopt a process, members share their opinions about 5 key questions. Does this process add value to our customers? Does this process make our work easier? Does this process make our work faster? Does this process represent the simplest way to accomplish the outcome we desire? And does the implementation of this process still leave people feeling empowered and trusted? Now, of course, the team can add more questions to make the checklist more relevant for their work. And I suggest each of you to suggest it to your company or your clients. So what happens is that when you ask this question, each team member in a round can share their answers, yes or no, and at least one example of how the process adds value, makes the work easier or faster, is the simplest way to accomplish what the team desires, and how it will make people feel. So if there are 2 or more no's to these answers, then the team must elaborate a different solution for the challenge that they are trying to address. And we implemented the radical simplicity in Asteris as well, and it really works, because it forces you to think about, are we just making things more complicated? Is there any way to make it simpler? Another element that may reduce complicatedness is the way issues and drivers are processed. So we say that an issue is any potentially limiting factor or situation or dynamic that can emerge at an individual or an organizational level. At the individual level is an emotional issue or a perception of a gap between reality and expectation of people. And at the organizational level is the perception of an individual or group of a gap between the current situation or a situation that is anticipated and the organizational purpose or principles or values. So something that doesn't, is in collision with purpose, principles, and values. So the driver is what underlines an issue. So if the issue is a symptom, the driver is the cause of the symptom, like a description of what is happening that may support or hinder the organization. So in a traditional organization, the emergence of a problem generally travels up the organization until a senior leader, alone or with other senior leaders, decides to intervene, and the solution is cascading down the organization. And not only this process is slow, but the solution very often is not the best, because the proposer sits very far from those experiencing the problem, even if they can be the customers or the employees, it doesn't matter. In AEquacy, it is everyone's responsibility to reveal, to surface an issue and to allow a broader peer group to discuss it, generally the team, as it may reveal a challenge or an opportunity for a team or for the organization. And in AEquacy, we have also established a simple yet very effective process to surface and discuss issues and drivers at the team level. What do we have? Yeah, we have the peer feedback loops. And I'm talking about peer feedback loops in alternative to the performance appraisals. So more and more companies are abandoning the idea of classic yearly performance appraisals and are replacing them with frequent and informal check-ins between managers and subordinates. Among some of the companies that have moved to this more dynamic approach are, for example, Adobe, Dell, IBM, Deloitte, General Electric. So the right of performance appraisal takes away hundreds of thousands of hours of the managers and the employees' time. One of the worst aspects of performance appraisal is that it is linked to financial rewards and punishments, and this produces several drawbacks. The focus of the performance appraisal is on past behavior, and because it takes place at a much later date than the observed behavior, it doesn't really help much in supporting the current performance or putting people in the best position to succeed in the future. It is an assessment process, it's not a development process. So in the current context where markets, competition, and technology change continuously, employees need more up-to-date developmental input. And companies must rapidly respond to emerging needs and challenges. We need to consider that employees' focus on roles may also change several times a year. And also team performance is much more critical in our opinion than individual performance. So this context requires a different focus on dynamics, on continuous development focused feedback and feed forward, as well on both individual and team development, not just individual development. Now, for those who are not familiar with feed forward means giving someone future-oriented options or solutions instead of positive or negative feedback on the past. So, for example, I may say, next time you make a presentation, I suggest that you stand straight, grounded on your legs, and make eye contact with the audience and check if that generates increased attention and interest. There are several advantages in using feed forward. It avoids positive and negative judgment and thus emotional reaction from the receiver, who will be more open to listening and embracing the input received. Also, feed forward is solution oriented and gives suggestion on how to solve a problem or to be more effective, and gives the receiver alternative options to experiment with. And it also focuses on what can be changed, the future, not the past. It also reinforces trust between people, and it doesn't require lengthy personal experience with the receiver, because even a perfect stranger can give valuable feed forward. So these are 8 ways that are built in AEquacy, but they can also, or part of them that can be also be implemented without AEquacy in any company. So I would like to hear from you what, first of all, if you have comments, other insights, or in general, what you take away, what you will remember from this webinar.
I have a question, Giovanna.
Yeah.
I'm not sure I understood how it works with the peer feedback as an assessment, because as you said, performer reviews normally are used to not only reinforce with economic bonuses and so on, but also to decide who in the team gets a promotion. And very often, even in the best teams, you can see lots of competition. So how can peer give an assessment which includes neutrality to decide who is going to get promoted, for example? Let's forget about the financial side now. How does it work?
Now, in AEquacy, it works very easily because there's no places up to be promoted to.
Right.
So
Okay.
the problem is solved. But now let's talk about hierarchies. What we observe in some of those hierarchies is that the assessment and the development can be two different processes. So the assessment, you can base the assessment on a series of general, first of all, you know, the dashboards on the results of the business, results on the tasks that have been accomplished. For example, in Asteris, we have a dashboard that every single minute I can see where each person in Asteris and each team is standing in terms of how they're going about their goals. And you can you can leave an assessment, but a very quick assessment on the, let's say, personality, competencies, or you know, the people side of the performance appraisal. But what we suggest for hierarchies is to completely separate the discussions about the appraisal and instead focusing on, you know, continuous feedback. No, the process of the appraisal takes away so many hours from the managers and the employees' time. Managers generally are not even effective at giving feedback because they know that the employees is looking for a promotion, and if they give very low scores, they will not get the promotion. They want to be loved and respected by the employees, and so the feedback is diluted generally because they fear reactions, emotional reactions from the employees. The other piece is that no, this is the fundamental piece. You know, you measure the person separately from the developmental process. So, you know, two different things, at least. Any other question or comment or insight?
The companies you mentioned are more like more from the tech industry. So how do you
consulting as well?
And any idea on the very traditional versions like production, so where the traditions are deeper rooted and normally the higher companies are more hierarchical and stuff?
I don't have a statistics, but I have the personal experience on many clients that we have in food, drinks, manufacturing, etc. Well, performance appraisals processes are still very ingrained in their processes. And if you think about it, very often the consultancy organizations and the technological organizations are those who, in general, who introduce a new way of doing things because they need to be quicker, they need to be more agile, they need to be, and so they generally are the pioneers of new practices.
Yeah, I meant more like the team focus. So everything is brought down to team level. How you start that in a more traditional company?
Well, you know, the companies are very different. But for example, one of the first things that you can do is to stop the focus on individual performance and put the focus on team performance. So you will get you will get a raise if the whole team will be more effective than others, not the single individual. One of the most common problems of big organizations is the lack of collaboration, silos, etc. So this starts from the focus on the individual performance, because if I know that I will get the pay raise only for my performance, I don't care about collaborating. I will think about my stuff. So this is the first step to do.
Thank you. It's very rational.
Question, comments, insights, or different opinions as well. Okay, so I would leave you in a round where I would ask you, what do you find interesting in this webinar? Any idea that you may implement or suggest to your clients? Anything that left a mark in your mind?
I do have a question, Giovanna.
Yeah, sure.
You mentioned at one point that complicatedness and complexity are not the same thing. Could you expand on that, please?
Yeah, sure. Well, when you talk about complexity, is about, especially is related to what is around us. So factors that are outside our control. So now we live in very complex times because, for example, anything that happens in one region, like a pandemic, may impact the whole world. So how do we respond to external complexity? Is not to make things more complicated. It's about making things, so complex and complicated is not the same thing. Complicated, I see it as a human construct in a way that creates more doesn't create more complexity, because complexity can be dealt with easily in a way, but create more complication in the way we deal with the external factors or context. Does it make sense, Brian?
Kind of, yes. For just in contrast, I see complicated and complex as just different regions on a spectrum of sophistication. If I can use that word. Where at one end of the spectrum is simple, at the other end of the spectrum is chaos, and the sophistication goes through the simple region, the complicated region, the complex region, the chaotic region, and at a certain point, the systems get so sophisticated that they can't be managed. Their individual elements cannot be managed or predicted, and that's moving from the complicated range to the complex range. So complex systems, they can be controlled or measured or appreciated only at aggregate scales, because it's just there's too much. There are too many elements to track or to control individually.
Yeah, comes from the systemic approach. I imagine.
Yes, I Google. I was a systems engineer, so
yeah. So thank you. For me, it's more about complexity is the context in which we live, and complicatedness is how much we complicate our lives in dealing with complexity.
Okay.
But I can imagine that it makes some kind of a confusion in the system thinking way.
Mhm.
Thank you. So going back to the last question in our last 5 minutes, what are you taking away?
I found the way of seeing the achievements to help people going forward rather than based on their mistakes or things like this. No, I feel that the stick and the carrot, I don't know if it is says in the same
Stick
way
and carrot,
in Italian.
yes.
Stick and carrot is not a very good no,
Strategy,
motivational tool, because
Yeah.
if you did 3 things good and only 1 bad, you will be focusing on the bad, and this will really retain you from grow. So I believe this is very, very important, and it's still not you can find it easily in the companies.
Feed forward is not very practiced.
Yes.
Yeah.
And in the families as well, it's a cultural thing as well.
Yeah.
Or no?
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. Who else?
I'm interested to see where it leads. So if we look at companies from the 80s and today, and what are those companies will be capable of, like in 5 years, 10 years, who are changing their ways to simplicity and trust and self-organization. So I'm really curious to see that.
Well, I can see that there is a very increased interest in different forms of structuring a company, because people, is aware that the way hierarchies work is not bringing good results. So I hope that there will be an increase in companies adopting this kind of different structure. Thank you, Dora. Renata, one last comment. Microphone.
Microphone. Well, my takeaway is, first of all, use your judgment, always. I love it. It's pure common sense. So for all those who use the word traditional as opposed to new, this is very traditional and in the same time so new. So I love it. And secondly, same thing for the other mantra, which is focus on the team and not on the individual, which seems so simple, but so you need to repeat it and to think of it all the time. So thank you for this.
Thank you, Renata. Brian, do you want to add anything before we close? Anything that you take away?
I'm reminded that I need to study AEquacy some more.
Oh, well, thank you for this comment, because I would like to remind you a couple of things. First of all, that in October 12th, there will be an AEquacy Taster workshop. It's a one-day experience of how AEquacy works in comparison with how hierarchies work. And also that we offer the facilitator training program for those who want to become AEquacy facilitators. Also, I would like to invite you to join the next webinar in AEquacy, and it will be about reaching organizational alignment. So I will be really glad to see you again next month, October 21st, same time, yes. So thank you very much for your active participation as always, and I really hope to meet you next time.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.
Thank you, everyone.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you, Giovanna. Thank you all.